the Knicks added more depth to their bench. They just added Malcolm Brogdon. And they also added, well, they also brought back Landry Shamet. Sorry, there was a hair on me. They also brought back Landry Shamet. Listen, this Knicks team, the roster, they got depth. Like, they are literally just building off of what they, did last year, and they are continuing to build the depth of their bench, which was one of the main criticisms of them last year, although, in my opinion, I felt like they had depth, but they didn't always, use it properly. Like, I felt like Landry Shamet, who they brought back, and DeLon Wright, I felt like were quality players, and you saw it in the playoffs. Regardless, though, that's last year. It's neither here nor there. However, their bench now consists of Landry Shamet back, okay. Like I said, they picked up Malcolm Brogdon. They added Gershon Yabusele, who we remember what he did in the Olympics, and he had a pretty good year last year with the Sixers. And he's still in his prime and stuff like that. And he's really developed his game, He started out on the Celtics, I don't know how many years ago that was. Maybe 6 years ago or whatever. But since then, he has really developed his game. So he's a good player. And they added Jordan Clarkson, who, fair enough, Jordan Clarkson is not 26 anymore, but Jordan Clarkson's still a bucket. Like, he can still get you 20 when he wants to, right? We know he can score. And one of the things that the Knicks needed, was scoring off the bench. So they have addressed, some of their issues, so to speak. And they still have Miles McBride coming off the bench. Good player. Miles McBride could be a candidate for Sixth Man of the Year. He could have been last year too, technically. So I really like the Knicks roster. Malcolm Brogdon, by the way. I understand that, especially at this point in his career, people aren't going to look at him as a major roster move because he has a pretty large injury history, which has contributed to him missing a lot of time, throughout his career. So, fair enough. But Malcolm Brogdon on the Celtics 3 years ago, I guess at this point. Yeah, 3 years ago. Malcolm Brogdon won Sixth Man of the Year. He was one of the premier three-point shooters. He was one of the reasons the Celtics were such a good three-point shooting team. He was shooting like 47% from three. Like, he was awesome. And so his role on the Knicks, he doesn't have to even be sixth man. He doesn't have to play large minutes. He just needs to be healthy. Malcolm Brogdon healthy, if you remember him on the Pacers, a really good point guard for them. Does what you need him to do. And now you're having him being the third string point guard. That's a win. Again, Malcolm Brogdon, only 3 years removed, won Sixth Man of the Year. And I don't know if, I'm trying to remember if I remember correctly, he may have either started the year with the Celtics and then they moved him to the bench, or maybe he was on the Celtics the year prior and he was starting, and then they got Derek White and they moved him to the bench. I can't remember exactly how it manifested. But he was still technically like a starting caliber player at that point, right? So we're not talking too long ago about Malcolm Brogdon in that sense. So I'm not saying Malcolm Brogdon is Jalen Brunson. I'm not saying that, but again, when you put players in situations where they get to maximize, their what they do best, and also play an integral role without overplaying. So like, I'll give you a couple examples. I kind of use these examples often because I feel like people, remember and understand these players. So obviously a very recent example is Kristaps Porzingis. Now, he obviously played a larger role than maybe Malcolm Brogdon will on the Knicks, say they win a championship. But Porzingis was in a position where it's not like when he was on the Knicks or even on Dallas. He was the third, maybe fourth option, depending on the night, Drew Holiday, Derek White. But like, he played a good amount of minutes. So again, Malcolm Brogdon's not going to play as many minutes as him. But it's the same thing where Porzingis didn't have to be the number one option getting 25 a night, because unfortunately he had his own share of injuries throughout his career. And so like, being asked to only do that in spurts, while he may have been able to do it a little bit more often, obviously on the Celtics his role didn't demand that, but like, that allowed him and the team to be the best they could be. So another example I'll give you, which may be a bit more comparable to Malcolm Brogdon, would be Otto Porter Jr. on the Golden State Warriors, the year they won the championship in 2022, ironically against Celtics. So Otto Porter Jr. was, I don't know, he was the second, third overall. He was a high draft pick, like very high. But at this point in his career, he had, had a bunch of injuries, and he was dealing with a lot of foot issues rather. And so if you remember, when he was on the Warriors, he didn't play every regular season game. And when he did play, he only played like 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, per game. And he may have had a larger role than Malcolm Brogdon also will on the Knicks, but I feel like it's a bit more comparable. So say all that to say, Otto Porter Jr. was just asked to be kind of like a 3-and-D guy at that point, He didn't have to be that same second overall pick and all that stuff. You know what Otto Porter Jr. did? He was like crucial for that team in many situations. Like, he was very, very important. And so I'm saying, long-winded answer to exemplify that, like, Malcolm Brogdon, it's fair enough, past his prime, past the Indiana days, all that. But if you're telling me Malcolm Brogdon, you're asking him let's say every 7 games or so to give you, and I'm just using 7 games as a random number, but every 7 games to give you 15 and 6 assists. Or even just 10 and 6 assists, 10 and 4 assists. Like, that, I feel like that's easy for him, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not asking a lot. And even that, I don't even know if they even need that much. I don't know. It depends on the night. So I'm saying, when you get a player of that quality, they can be very important. Now, I saw another report that came out after about something about like, oh, I don't remember if I read this correctly, like, oh, the Knicks might be like interested in trading him after signing him. I don't know if I read that correctly. I thought that was weird. That didn't make sense to me, but I'll have to go and look after. But I say all that to say, listen, we talk about the Cavs, and the Cavs have a really nice deep bench and a lot of quality players up and down the roster. The thing that I have said that, at this current moment, if we, went through the playoffs, I would probably lean Knicks to come out of the East right now. You know, things could change, but right now that's kind of where I'm leaning. But I also said I wouldn't be surprised if it was the Cavs, and that's because the Cavs do have a lot of talent up and down the roster, and their depth was more than the Knicks' depth. You know, that was kind of their advantage. Listen, I think DeAndre Hunter, if you watch this video, you know I'm a fan of his. He is a starter. The only reason he's not starting on the Cavs is because there's no room for him to start. Although maybe now that they traded what is his name? Why am I drawing a blank? I literally see his face in my head. You know him, Isaac Okoro. Now they traded Isaac Okoro. Is he gonna start now? Maybe. But like, we're talking about having Alonzo, who is a starter, DeAndre Hunter, I don't know why I literally just forgot his name. DeAndre Hunter, a starter too, and other good players off their bench. So, like, we're talking about really good players. So, I would say, excluding Miles McBride, because I don't think that's necessarily a fair comparison. But if I was picking, like, DeAndre Hunter or Malcolm Brogdon or Landry Shamet at this point in their careers, I'm picking DeAndre Hunter. Like, easily, like, a really, really good two-way player, right? But when you add them all together, Miles McBride, Jordan Clarkson, Gershon Yabusele, Landry Shamet, and Malcolm Brogdon, the combination of all that off the bench, listen, their bench might be, I had to look at the Cavs roster again, but their bench might be just as good or really close now with all the pickups. Because again, we're talking about 9th and 10th people off the bench. We're not talking about Malcolm Brogdon being their 6th man, which, again, maybe he still could be that at this point in his career, but maybe not. But he's not even going to be asked to be doing that. So that's why I feel like these pickups that people don't necessarily either not necessarily pay attention to, or they don't find them significant because, again, we're talking about someone coming on a veteran minimum, you know, past their prime, and we're not talking about, like, Luka, right? Because obviously, again, completely different players at different points in their career. But these are the type of roster moves and players I talk about all the time that make or break your championship roster, because you're going to need to rely on other people at some point. And it's going to be an Otto Porter Jr. like for the Warriors. They also relied on GP2, you know, that championship run. They relied on different people. For the Celtics, again, Porzingis, again, I don't know if that's I don't know if it's a fair comparison, because Porzingis was definitely like a pretty large role. But again, Porzingis being the 3rd, 4th option, they get to rely on him, rely on Al Horford. You have to have players like that. It's not always going to be able to be Jason Tatum or Jalen Brunson. Yes, they're going to do like the heavy lifting. They're going to get you there, and they're going to, you know, give you the 25 a night and consistently show up and all that stuff. But you need other guys to take you over the edge. And I'll give you a really good example. Lakers versus Warriors. 2 years ago, I believe. I think it was 2 years ago. Do you remember when they played each other in the, was it first round maybe? Might have been the first round. Or second round maybe. I don't remember. I think it was the second round actually, because I think that was the year the Warriors played the Kings. The first time they made the playoffs. The Kings in like 16 years or whatever. So the Warriors play the Lakers. And like the teams were going back and forth, right? Guess what happens in the 4th quarter of, I don't know, was it game 2, game 3. I don't remember what game it was. Do you remember what was classified as the Lonnie Walker game? Where Lonnie Walker went crazy in the fourth quarter and he barely played at all prior to that. He played in the quote-unquote, what they call garbage time. I don't really like saying that, but the garbage time in the game before, because I think the Warriors blew them out. And he showed, I guess, flashes, in the garbage time, right? Guess what happens? He gets an opportunity in the fourth quarter of that next game, whatever it was. And he went crazy. He had I don't remember, but maybe he had 15 in the fourth quarter. And he didn't do that again. It was the only time he did it. But it was the Lonnie Walker game. And so again, for Malcolm Brogdon, in a 7-game series, he just needs to have one Lonnie Walker game, right? So that's my whole point of these, players coming off the bench. I think the Knicks have a squad. I really do. I think they're nice. I think they're nicer than people give them credit for. So, thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoyed, and see you soon.